All right, now let's go ahead and finish this lecture with the section on getting the most out of your myofascial training. So why we think myofascial training is such a big deal is because it helps us prevent injuries. And we know that most injuries are related to our connective tissue and our fascia, and this is because those type of tissues are 10 times more sensory than our muscle, right? So there's 10 times more sensory nerve endings in our fascia than our muscles, which is one of the reasons why we tend to get injured there more frequently. So how do we go ahead and prevent injury? Well, we need to start thinking about training rather than training in isolated sections of our body, right? We need to start training our body kind of in whole pieces. So it's kind of this idea of whole body versus segmented body training. And that really goes into a lot of what functional training is. So in many ways, myofascial training is functional training. We also know that muscles determine body structure and size, but connective tissue determines our form. So you can have someone that has really, really large muscles, and so they're big and bulky, and they look like they're really healthy, right? But if they don't have a strong connective tissue base, they're not going to be able to prevent themselves from injury at the same level of someone who has really strengthened that connective tissue. So again, muscles determine body structure size, but our connective tissue determines our form. So really what we're trying to help you learn is that maybe we need to start taking an altered approach to how we train our clients. And this altered approach or different approach is going to include training movement patterns, not muscles. And it's going to be thinking from a more functional perspective than our traditional kind of bulking up and or trying to train certain muscles. So again, thinking about training movement patterns, not training muscles. So think about it this way, right? Just as your muscles remodel themselves, right? We break them down, it builds up, okay? And they do that in response to our training. The fascia remodels itself as well, okay? And it does so by our signals from our cells, if we have certain injuries, if we're holding on to mechanical forces for a long time, okay, gravity. So there's all these different things that go into shaping and remodeling our fascia. And it's really important to think that if the fascia remodels, why aren't we training the fascia itself? And that's where training these myofascial lines, this last lecture that you listened to, is really important. So how do we get the most out of that myofascial training? Right, first things first is making sure that we're integrating total body cohesive movements into our training. Okay, we also want to make sure our movements are rhythmic in nature. Okay, so going from loaded to unloaded, like transferring movement and where our body's balance is really important as well. Movements should be multi-directional and utilize more myofascial lines. So really incorporating those different myofascial lines, and many of them are multi-directional. And movement should be tailored to the individual and be based on their needs and their physical limitations. And that bullet could be in every single lecture that we ever talk about, because that is the most important thing when we're working with our clients. So now what I get a lot of from our students is, okay, so when I hear about myofascial release, you think about things like foam rolling, right? And maybe some of the new kind of massagers that exists. But there is kind of this more popularity right now for certified personal trainers massaging and doing some sort of hands-on soft tissue work with their clients. And there's an article that is hyperlinked on this slide, and I highly suggest that you read that. Because what you're going to see is that our field typically does not recommend it unless that person has a special certification and or training in soft tissue release. So what you tend to see is that personal trainers, they feel like they're expected to do more and more and more, and so they start taking on the role of a massage therapist and or a physical therapist, and they don't necessarily have the training. So I would highly recommend that you stay within your scope, and then unless you go and get a certain training that involves you learning how to use soft tissue work on your clients, I would highly suggest that you do not do that. Because as you'll see later on in class, right, you want to make sure that you are staying within your scope and that you aren't setting yourself up to be negligible, so that if something does happen and you get sued, you could actually be in real trouble. Okay, and for another reason of just making sure that we're doing things safely with our clients. So please read that article so that you can kind of see the most up-to-date knowledge on kind of what CPTs can do in regards to massage and soft tissue work. If you have any questions, please let me know. We can talk about it during lab. Also, here are some references in case you wanted to learn a little bit more information on some of the things that we discussed during today's lecture. Thanks so much.